scripts and the direction. So let's start from there. Do you think scripts are essential?
That's a very good question. I think in the beginning, scripts are very helpful to understand how the flow is supposed to go. And as you get better at it, I don't think you want to use scripts at all. And so this is my analogy is when we were growing up, my older brother, who's 4 years older than me, taught me how to ride a bicycle because we were relatively poor. We got like some junky bicycle that was for an adult and not for kids. So my foot could barely reach the pedal, forget about touching the floor. So I was very scared. And he would put me on this bicycle in the middle of the street. He would push and say pedal and just keep pedaling and don't think about falling and you'll be all right. Of course I fell. Of course I was scared. And if that's your first sales call, you're going to have a pretty bad experience and it might be emotionally scarring to you, if not physically scarring. So I think we invent things for kids to learn how to ride bicycles. They're called training wheels.
Yeah.
And we give them an appropriately sized bicycle. But what you do is you outgrow that training wheel phase and the smaller bicycle. And this is actually really helpful to learn how to do something. So scripts to me are kind of training for you in terms of how it's supposed to be structured. The reason why I don't think scripts are great mid to long term is because you're dealing with a human in front of you and they're never going to follow your script. And so when they present something that's different, you're going to panic and you're going to say, oh, where am I in this script? They jumped to step 7 and you're going to want to bring it back to step 2 where you were. And that's one way to communicate to the client, this person's really not listening to me.
Yeah, and I would have to agree with that. I think scripts are amazing at starting out, yet the problem with scripts are that you may sound robotic, and you may sound robotic because you're repeating words on a paper. And, as humans, we have to, be able to adapt to the situations that are presented in that exact moment. So many of those situations there is such a wide variety of objections or a variety of situations that you can fall into. And Chris, I started selling donations. That was the first thing that I was selling, was donations. And that is the worst thing that you can sell, because the other person does not have a direct benefit, but the satisfaction from adding to a cause. So when you're asking people to add to a cause without receiving anything but an abstract satisfaction, there was a lot going on about, hey, is this real? Is this a scam? Is this, so if I was to follow a script, I would always get lost. So what I recommend always to people is to have points that they have mapped out and to know what is the end of the journey, but not necessarily how, what path I will take, whether that's A or B. That really does depend. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. You're talking about having some kind of strategy.
Yeah.
And it's kind of important to know where you need to end eventually because that will structure how you ask questions, how you're listening. Otherwise, what I see people do who are new to sales is they'll ask lots of random questions and the conversation will meander all over the place. And then they realize 30 minutes in, they're almost out of time. And then they rush to ask and it sounds really awkward and weird. It's like, so what did you like to buy? Like, I didn't even know we're in a buying conversation right now. So it's kind of important to understand that so that you can shape the conversation to ultimately naturally lead you to a place where asking for the sale seems the most obvious thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is why I really dislike when people say a sales call should be 25 minutes. I'm like, how did you calculate that? How did you come up with the 25 minutes? So the discovery call should be 12 minutes. That's the perfect length. And it's like every single call is so different that you can't just determine and say like this call should last this long. And then whenever that point reaches, you have to end it. You have to end it, you know? So I guess my question is, you mentioned how your heart was beating. You mentioned how you were probably sweating inside, probably on the outside too. Maybe not showing it off. But when was the time, and maybe it still happens to you, because sometimes it does to me. When was the time that heart beating and that like sweating on the inside kind of like stopped? When did you start feeling confident?
Mm. An analogy I would make for all of you to consider is imagine if you were invited to play chess, but no one told you how the game is played. And so you're watching complex moves happen and you're making really dumb moves yourself. And then ultimately you will lose. And so that's where I think a lot of the stress comes from and what you feel because you don't know how to play the game. So the first thing is just to learn the rules. And so once I started to figure out the structure of the calls, like how they're supposed to work, a lot of my stress and anxiety level went down. It would take I would say, 5 to 7 years before I actually got to that place where I felt confident enough that I could show up with very little information and have a conversation, knowing in my mind with the fundamental belief that if there's a job to win, I'm going to win it. But my close rate at that point was probably 70, 80%. I'll give you an example. Towards the end of us in the service business space, we got on a call and it was with a large tech company and it was a fairly sizable job. I think they wanted to give us over $100,000 to design a logo. Okay. And so I was on the call with Ben Burns, my chief operating officer, and Ben is super prepared. He's got notes, he's dug through their website, he's done all this kind of stuff. And finally, we're talking to the CEO, and the CEO asked me a question. He says, Chris, do you understand what we do? Have you been to the website? And he asked me point blank. And so I had to make a split second decision. Like, am I going to try to BS my way through this? And I said to him, no, I haven't. I glanced at it, but I can't figure it out. I'm going to be real direct with you. And I could see Ben's face like, oh my God, Chris, you just killed the job. You just totally killed the job. But you know, it turns out later on, we did get the job. And the CEO said, I like this guy because I know I'm going to get a direct, honest answer and there's no BS. See, so I am of this mindset, this belief that if you, Alec, or me, or someone else shows up exactly who we are, fully resolved with who it is that we think we are, and we don't pretend to be anybody else, somebody else has that ability to make the decision, do I like that or don't I like it? And that means that we're going to attract the kinds of people who want to work with someone like us, or we will repel or push away the kinds of people who don't want to work with people like us. So I want to let people know right away, I'm not going to BS you. I'm going to be very direct. If that's your thing, let's go make some music together. Or if that's not your thing, if you want to be lied to, if you want to be given information, if you want BS, you're entitled to find that, but it won't be with me.
I love that, Chris, and I agree up to 90%. Now here's the
Okay,
thing that I disagree with, and I would love to actually dive deeper into this.
perfect.
And it's so my background is in human psychology actually, and psychophysiology, which is lie detection. Okay, which is crazy and quite fun. But here's the thing: the majority of people, they need a little bit of a motivation. So would you say with the approach that you just mentioned, like you just let people, decide and you don't necessarily give them that push that they need, or perhaps if there is an objection, there is no need to handle it? What would you say?
Wait, ask that question again. I'm not sure I understood
So,
it.
yeah, so imagine that you have a prospect who, you've been totally honest with them. And at the very end, they have a very specific objection. And perhaps that objection is real or not. Would you just say like, okay, no worries, when you figure it out, call me? Or would you prompt them to find out if that objection is real? And if perhaps they do want to work with you, but they
I
have
see.
trouble.
I look at objections as a request for more information.
Okay, I love that.
To ignore the objection is to say, I don't trust you, I don't respect you, I'm not hearing you, I'm not listening, I'm not seeing you. This is probably the worst possible thing that you can do. So if
I
the
love
client says, I'm not sure I can afford this, then you're like, well, why don't you think about it? You're saying, I don't really care, I'm not going to help you, and someone else will help them. So this is a very different thing. The reason why I got mixed up was I thought we're going to argue about something, but you just asked me a very real question,
No, yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you
no,
have to address it.
yeah, because lately what I'm finding is that there is people think that it's a new approach, but for me, it's not. It's just not the right approach. People are saying, "Well, if people want to work with me, they're just gonna buy," and that comes down to, I don't remember who said it, but someone said, "You just build an offer and people will buy it." And I always think like, No, it's not exactly like that. You have to like promote the offer, you have to showcase the offer, you have to tell people about it. Because otherwise it's not just going to sell itself. What do you think?
Well, I mean, if you could create such a beautiful offer that it becomes so stupid for someone not to buy, then great, then you won't have to do as much. But very few of us actually have such a strong offer, and we're going to be a little delusional. And I'll tell you, I'll admit right now, I was a little delusional at the beginning of my career. I thought because I have a good portfolio, because I graduated at the top of my class, that I think I'm a pretty good designer, that I don't have to sell any of this. And I told myself this story. That's why I did not develop the communication skills, the sales skills, and I didn't get any of that kind of training at all. Only to find out in the real world, it doesn't work like that. There's theory and then there's reality, right? And so the portfolio or the body of work or the quality of your service might be the thing that attracts people, but you have to do a little bit to get them across the finish line, which is to say, yes, I'd like to work with you. I have this fundamental belief that I'm skilled at what I do, that what I do is very valuable. But in order for me to give you this gift, you have to be smart enough to recognize it and pay me so that I may help you. And the only way I can help you with being smart enough is to give you as much information that you need to make a decision either to work with me or to work with someone else. And so that process is called sales.
Exactly. I love that. I love that because I've been seeing, those debates and it's always like, yeah, the offer will open the door and will, get the conversation going. And maybe people will buy directly in certain scenarios, but sometimes you do need to, elevate the value of your offer by speaking to that person because people do buy from people. And I really liked a question in the comments from Sun. Sun asked us, should you detach yourself from the sale or should you go in with the mentality, I'm going to win this sale, yes or yes, and I have to win it?
That's a great question. Before I answer that question, I want to hear what you have to say about that, Alec.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I always go in and I say, hey, if I need to win it, I will win it. Now, I acknowledge that it doesn't always depend on me. And I say that because there is a variety of circumstances that are only in the hands of God. So realistically, I cannot acknowledge if the other person is necessarily lying to me or not. So what I do is I go in with the mentality that I will do my best in order to win the sale, but I do not know. And frankly, I care to a certain point if I will. And I care to a certain point because I have my pipeline full. So therefore, I know that if this person does not end up working with me, someone else will who does want to work with me. So I will do what is in my hands, but if I can't win the sale, I can't win the sale.
Very good. Okay, let me add my take on this, okay?
Please.
Son, this is an excellent question. I'm glad that you asked it. And we might find some differences between how you, me, and so many of our friends are here in the sales space and how our perspective might be. So let's have a conversation around this.
Let's do it.
Okay. I don't enter a call ever thinking that I want to sell, that I need to sell, and that the sale is inevitable. I enter the call with a mindset of service. And what I want to do is I want to be of service to someone. And so what I can do is to help them through thinking and get clarity around how to make a decision. The better that I can do that, the more likely they are going to make a decision. And I accept the fact that there's one of three options that they're going to pick. Hire me, hire someone else, or hire no one. Okay? So what I'm trying to do is help them get clarity around the problem. What is the real problem that you're trying to solve? And does it cause you a lot of pain and discomfort? Would the solution of the problem bring you great gain, joy, happiness, and lower friction in your life? Is this a big, important problem? And do you really desire the solution? Once I get clarity around that, then I know I can help, or I know someone else is better off helping them. And then I want to act as a fiduciary, a person who wants the best outcome for the prospect and not for me. And I find that the more that I do this, the more I detach myself from wanting me to be the solution to all their problems, the more likely they are to buy from me and to trust me and to pay me more. It's kind of a strange thing. I think sometimes when we want to force the sale, we can come across as being very needy or desperate. And those are not good signals of confidence to the other person, right? You're like,
Yeah.
yeah,
No. Well, it's hard to argue with that, Chris. I mean, it's hard to argue because I just don't think that the people who go in with the mentality of I need to win this and I definitely, you know, I have to, and it's a need and I must, uh, they're going to lose it because at a certain point they will push those boundaries of the person. Now, I will say that I think different personalities do require a little bit of a different approach. Still, the base of serving them and helping them make a decision is the essential approach that I will always have towards people. But unfortunately, I have faced people both in the lie detection industry and in sales who either they're very reserved, okay? So I need to be very careful with my words because anything that can be a little bit confrontational, a little bit direct, can actually push them away. And then I have found people who have very, very big ego, who I know the struggle may be that they just think they know everything. Okay, so therefore I need to guide them to seeing that, hey, you might have been in the industry for I don't know how many years and you might have been doing all of this, but you're doing this wrong. So therefore my approach will be different. What do you think about that?
yeah. I think it's very important for you to recognize that each and every single person that's in front of you, whether on Zoom call or in real life, is an individual, unique person with unique needs. This is why at the beginning of our conversation, I said that sales scripts are good to get training and to understand the overall flow, but it's not something that you want to stick to because if you have a very passive person in front of you, you don't want to come at them with your aggressive energy. And if someone is very aggressive, like you had mentioned, somebody maybe with a big ego is like a real fast talking decision maker, let's go, go, go. You also don't want to be like, well, here's what I think, and maybe they're not going to vibe with you. And it's like so what you want to do is you kind of want to match and mirror the other person to find common ground, to build rapport, and then you can slowly shift them towards a state where they can make a decision. So if somebody is talking to me really fast, they're like, hey, Chris, yeah, super happy to talk to you. You know, we got 45 things to talk about. We already talked to 2 other vendors, so we just need to know. Da, da, da. I'm like, whoo, wow. Client or prospect, are you in a rush? Because I was just overwhelmed with how much information you're giving me. And then I acknowledge that, and then I could slow the tempo of the conversation down to say like, okay, I heard lots of things, but I'm not as fast as you, and apologize in advance, but let's identify 2 or 3 things that are really important to you. So I want to meet them where they're at to acknowledge what's going on and then bring them to a more stable state. Jordan Belfort, whether you like him or not, the Wolf of Wall Street, he has this sales course. It's called the straight line system. And he says when you veer too high or too low from the straight line, you start to veer away from the possible sale. So for me, it's like if they have crazy energy and are manic almost, I want to bring them down gently to that middle part where we can make rational decisions together. If they're down and they're always questioning things and they're skeptical and they're overthinkers, I want to get their energy back up to this point in which they can also make clear decisions. So it's a little bit like being a conductor. You want to manage the music and kind of make sure that everyone's playing well with the emotions and the beat and all that stuff. So that's what I look at it as.
I love that, and I will tell you a story to clarify a little bit because people are saying, well, isn't that a red flag? If someone, for example, is a little bit manic, and I don't think so because that is their personality, and in many occasions that is just how they are. So when I first got my first job, my first serious job, I was 17, and I walked into this office, and it was, you know, for me it was this shiny office, and I walked and I looked at this man who was tall, big, and you know, quite masculine, and I didn't have the beard, I didn't have the hair, Chris, and I was almost a little bit scared, and I sat across him, and I didn't know that he's supposedly famous and popular. And he was the guy who introduced lie detection in Spain. And I was like, wow, like, fantastic. It's like, I've been on this television, I've been in this, I've been in this. And at the time, I was going to be his community manager and his marketer. So I could see that throughout the conversation, I was just, not there because first of all, it was very hard for me to pick up the conversation because he was very intimidating. And second of all, I was struggling to realistically bring my status up. So I looked at him at the end and I was like, hey, like, listen, you are this famous guy who I didn't know about and who there is so many people that don't know anything about. So you've been on all the national televisions. You have this many followers and this and that. But frankly, like you don't have the popularity that you want, and I can see that. And I just knew that he was ego driven, and I just knew that me saying that was already going to be a game changer in the conversation. So he literally just looked onto the desk and he was like, you see that desk? It's yours. You just gotta get me results. And I was like, awesome. So to me, that was my first introduction to starting to understand that different people really do need different approach. And it was my first job. That's how I got into actual lie detection.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say we have so many mutual friends in this live here. It's crazy. So I just want to acknowledge all of you for tuning in. We got Tyler, we have Sunny, we have Marketing Harry, we got you talking about this, and so many other people. I'm just seeing names flash by. So we must be hitting a chord for all the salespeople to come out of the Instagram woodwork to join us here. Yeah. So I love seeing that. Now, one thing. I want to say, let's say that you're not a human psychology behavioral expert, a lie detector like Alec is.
Okay.
What can you do in a situation when you're in a room with a person who is famous, who is physically very big and possibly intimidating and very masculine and whatever alpha energy bro vibes they're sending out to you? What do you do? What if you're a petite woman or a shy Asian person like myself? What can you do? Well, I'm going to suggest that first, if you feel intimidated, if you feel nervous, I would just address the elephant in the room. I would just say it, because speaking your fear diminishes how it plays out. Because what happens is the echo chamber of your mind repeats a thought over and over until it becomes like this frenzied, vibrating thing. You know this. We felt this before. And so the best way you do is you let the pressure valve open a little bit so that it can escape your body. So in a situation like that, if I walked into the room, I'm fairly petite. I'm 5'8", 135 pounds. And if there's this big human being in front of me, I would shake his hands like, oh my God, you have massive hands and your reputation precedes you. I'm not sure if everybody knows this, but I know the work that you've done and how important you've been in bringing lie detection to Spain. And so that person's going to say, okay, and now I've said what I felt and I'm not worried anymore. And that's a great way to acknowledge the person in front of you, to be very real and just say it like that. You notice something that I did at the very beginning of our conversation, Alec, and everybody who was paying attention? I said, oh my God, you have amazing hair and a luscious beard and a beautiful print shirt. And so now I don't have to think about that anymore. I'm moving on. And you might say, yes, it is right. I do have amazing hair. And then we're building rapport. It's a genuine thing, and I will put that out there. The next thing I would do is I would ask a question versus, because I don't have your same skills to be able to assume to know what it is that the person cares about. I would ask them this question. Since we're talking, I'm curious, what is the most important thing for you to solve? Like if you could solve this one problem, your life would be easier, better, you feel more fulfilled, and you feel happy. And there's a good chance if they have high self-awareness, they would say, you know what? In a small circle of people, they all know me. But I want everyone to know me on these platforms in this amount of time. I said, this is wonderful. And what would that do for you? And then they would tell me more and more, right? And then I would say, would you like help with that? And they would say, yes. I haven't sold anything. All I've been doing is asking questions to surface what's important to them, what's motivating them, so that I could possibly help them in the future.
I love that, Chris. Now, can I throw a curveball your way?
Please do. Go ahead.
You asked me, all of those questions. I say, hey, Chris, why are you asking me those questions? I mean, I'm here to interview you. Why are you
Okay.
asking questions?
Okay. I can, and my answer to that would be I could spend all day and night telling you about who I am, what's important to me, and what I can do. And that would have almost zero correlation to what's important to you. And so, what I would love to do is to find out what it is that you're looking for so don't waste your time, so that I can then, from my experience, pull things that are relevant and present those to you. Otherwise, I won't feel like I can help you, and I don't want to waste your time.
Okay. No, good,
Is that
because,
okay?
and this is why scripts do not work necessarily. I love that. I would like to give people an extra tip. So whatever it is you're doing and whatever it is your position, maybe you are an introvert like Chris. I actually I'm kind of in the middle. Maybe you are a very confident person. Maybe you have never done sales, so maybe you are experienced in sales. There is one thing that will immediately improve any of your personal relationships, and it's actually listening actively to the other person's answers. So you can even see that in our conversation, right? Is I try to realistically understand everything that you're saying, process that information, and only then speak. So whatever it is that you are doing and whatever scenario it is, it's trying to actively listen, process the information, then asking the next question will definitely improve all of your relationships, right? So I think if you are in a sales conversation, starting from that position of complimenting the person, I'm trying to recap here, uh, listening to their answers and asking them the right questions, would you say, Chris, that that is 50% the sale won?
Yes, I would just make one clarification. I don't think it's necessary to compliment people. I
Okay.
think if you feel something, if you feel genuine, you should just say it. And it will come across as a compliment sometimes, but I just want to say, like, if I came into that room, like, you know what, I have to be honest, I'm really intimidated by you. You're a physically imposing person, and I've heard about you. That's not necessarily a compliment. That's just me admitting what I'm feeling, and then that allows me to focus on something else. So I don't want people to artificially find something to compliment. Like if I didn't like your hair, I wouldn't say it. If I didn't like your wild shirt, I would not say anything, right? So I'm not trying to force something, but I just want to be genuine, real, and grounded in the moment and connected to what it is that I'm thinking and feeling. But otherwise, yes.
I love that, and thank you that you actually like my hair and shirt. That's awesome. So Chris, there was a very interesting question that I catched kind of in the middle
Yeah.
of conversation, and someone asked, "What do you believe? What do we believe are the most important characteristics of a person who works in sales or who is, trying to sell their services?"
I think you already said it. I think a person who's curious so
Okay.
that they can ask questions, a person who doesn't have a giant ego, and a person who practices active listening. Those would be my three traits or characteristics.
Okay, I would go with, and it's very similar. I think it's kind of like encompasses everything. But I would go. I love putting emphasis on empathy and emotional intelligence. I don't know to what extent you can train emotional intelligence, but what I know is that it is extremely important to have a high emotional intelligence. Because if you actually genuinely perceive how other people feel, you're capable of precisely targeting that emotion and speaking about it and acknowledging what is actually happening in that precise moment, because there is a lot of people who go into sales conversations and they think that they've heard everything, they think that they understand everything, right? And suddenly the other person is on a whole different page, and then they get thrown away because they told that they had the sale won, and then hey, like nothing ever happened. So that would be like my number one thing. What do you think?
I like that. I think your high emotional intelligence is written about in Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference. I think he calls it something like labeling. So when you experience someone going through an emotion, whether it's positive, neutral, or negative, you know, it's important for you to acknowledge that, and you would just label that. I sense that you're frustrated. I hear that you're hungry for a solution. You know, whether they're what is that called? Visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, you would kind of identify those things. And then you would express it to them in the way that they can understand it. I think I'm mostly a visual person. So saying, I see that you're uncomfortable, Chris, would say like, oh, I'm glad that you see that I'm uncomfortable right now. I feel more connected to you right now.
Yeah, I would love to put a little bit more, like everyone. This single thing. It's extremely important in your, like, realistically labeling it, even if it's just for yourself. Oftentimes, it's really really helpful for you to actually understand. Hey, I believe the other person is feeling this way, or I believe that this is actually holding them back, and then going ahead and saying that, hey, I believe that you're in this situation. Is that correct? And then they would say yes. And if that situation actually is something that they truly believe in, and I love working with people who, for example, are very, they love their family, or they have kids and they want to, perhaps save more time, and they want to be focusing on X, Y, and Z. And I love asking them realistically the question like, hey, is your family the priority? And they usually say yes, because it is. And I say, so would you say like you're a very, you're a big family guy? And you're like, yeah, like I love my family. When it comes to making the decision at the very end, if we relate the sale to helping their family, it's really hard for them to disconnect from this. It's really hard for them to disconnect from that label and break and say like, hey, like actually, like my family is not the priority. So saying that to them, like, hey, this would actually help you, for you to be with your family more. And I believe that is a priority for you, correct? Yes, it is. It's kind of one of the best closes that I experience in those situations.
Absolutely.
What?
I have a question for you, Alec. For some reason, I can't see any new comments anymore. Are the comments frozen for you?
No, the comments are good for me. Mostly people are asking if you would ever consider wearing a wig.
For fun, yes. Forever, no.
Okay, well, those were the recent questions.
Yeah. Okay. I can't see that question for some reason. My comments are stuck. But I wanted to circle back to a question that Tyler had asked, which is, has your mindset changed about over time about wanting to win? So I think I'll throw that question to you first, and then I'll answer it. Has your mindset changed about wanting to win over time?
Chris, I am an extremely competitive person. Nonetheless, I acknowledge the position that I'm in. And I acknowledge that I'm not in urgency to win anything in life right now. Okay, so I always like to win at everything that I do in life, because that's just who I am and that's just how I am. But I acknowledge that not winning does not necessarily have the biggest impact. There is a certain situation and different degrees to what I'm